U.S. First Lady Melania Trump arrived in Nairobi last night for a landmark trip and was received by First Lady Margaret Kenyatta at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. The plane carrying the U.S. First Lady, who is on the third leg of her first solo visit to 4 African countries, touched down shortly before 9 p.m. last night in Nairobi. Before coming to Kenya, the First Lady of the U.S., Melania Trump, started her African tour in Ghana early in the week before proceeding to Malawi. Also, the airport received the U.S. First Lady was the U.S. Ambassador to Kenya, Robert Godek, and the Chief of Staff in the Kenyan First Lady's office, that is Constance Gikonyo, among others. The First Lady follows discussion she held with the First Lady, Margaret Kenyatta, at White House when the Kenyan First Lady accompanied President Uhuru Kenyatta on a visit to Washington, D.C. in August this year. This was followed by an announcement by the U.S. First Lady during a reception she hosted for delegates to the 73rd meeting of the United Nations General Assembly, that is UNGA, where she confirmed her visit to Ghana, Malawi, Kenya, and Egypt. The U.S. First Lady is accompanied by her Kenyan counterpart, will today visit the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust before heading to State House for talks, and later to the Kenyan National Theatre, where they will be treated to Kenyan creative cultural performances. The U.S. First Lady will conclude her tour of Africa by visiting Egypt. And as I said earlier on, is that the First Lady will be visiting David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, and already she is there from the pictures that you can see on your screen on her first tour to the country, coming to you, the pictures coming to you live from the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust here in Nairobi, in her tour to see how the African countries are doing, and also to see how more cooperation between her office as the First Lady of the United States can go with African nations. And of course, shortly we'll be speaking to an international affairs expert from Washington, D.C., that is Dirk, who is the president of CD Global Strategies Group. We'll be talking to him shortly so that you can understand the relationship between the U.S. and the African countries and how much of impact that has in as far as the presidency of Donald Trump is concerned with the African continent. Of course, this coming at a time that there has been several issues castigated against the U.S. president in as far as his relations with the African countries is concerned. There are some sentiments that he uttered a few months into his term against the African continent, and this has informed conversations across the continent on the relationship between the African nations and the U.S. under the leadership of President Donald Trump. So you can see there Melania Trump getting to have an interaction with the Wildlife Trust, that is the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust, as she is taken through that animal orphanage, if I may call it so, where they take care of baby elephants, most of them that have been orphaned, some of them being victims of the poaching that goes on in the country. So be expecting to hear from her what she has to say in as far as the conservation efforts are concerned. On your screen again, you see the First Lady of Kenya, Margaret Kenyatta, who has also been vocal in terms of preserving the wildlife in the country, or conserving the wildlife in the country. So we will see how that relationship goes as soon as they start to make an address. But for now, those are the pictures of the First Lady of the U.S. Having visited the country this time, the very first time that she's flying alone out of the U.S. to the African continent. Flying alone to mean that she's not accompanied, or she's not accompanying President Donald Trump. So as I said, we'll shortly be talking to Dirk, so that he can tell us some of the insights in as far as the American populace is concerned, and the relations between the U.S. and Kenya specifically, but also in a larger extent with the African continent. So let's listen into what's going on within the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust. Those are the live pictures from David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust here in Nairobi, where the First Lady of the United States of America is visiting that particular location alongside the First Lady of Kenya, Margaret Kenyatta, to see the wildlife that has been conserved there. Now we want to talk to Dirk, who is the president of the CD Global Strategies Group. He's coming to us live from Washington, D.C. Dirk, if you can hear me, I don't know what time it is in the U.S. I believe it's still in the morning. Good morning. And first of all, can you tell us how important is this visit of Melania Trump to the African continent? How important is it in assessing the President Donald Trump's policy for Africa?
Well, I think it has the potential to be important because First Lady Melania Trump is visiting, causes and initiatives that fit with her Be Best campaign to help children's welfare. So I think it could be important in that it brings, needed attention from around the world to it. Now, as far as how it's going to affect President Trump's Africa strategy, I don't know, because it's not really clear what President Trump's Africa strategy is. So I don't think it can hurt, but it still remains to be seen if it's going to help.
Great. That's an important point, that you're saying you're not certain about what President Trump's policy on Africa is. What could be the problem? Because previously when you have had the previous presidents, and specifically talking about President Barack Obama, at least we could see something that was happening, especially with the Global Entrepreneurship Summit. What has taken so long for President Trump to really define his interaction and relationship with the African continent? Why?
Well, I think with President Obama, it was a special case because he obviously had ties to his father with Africa. And I think the problem with President Trump is that he has never really shown that he sees Africa as more than a place where aid is needed or where there might be conflicts. He hasn't really grasped that there are investment opportunities. There's security and anti-terrorism cooperation. There's tourism. And I think because he's been kind of slow to recognize that, there hasn't been really any initiative to engage with Africa like he could. And then, of course, with the derogatory comments that were made earlier this year, allegedly, that didn't help.
That's right. And now talking about, we know that President Trump is still struggling back at home with confidence levels, still being rated by media outlets that this is one of the lowest ranking for a sitting president in their second year of service. But then again, will this visit by Melania Trump and how she has conducted herself since January 20th, 2017, does it help anything in improving the image of President Donald Trump at home as well as globally?
It may help improve some parts of his reputation globally because he's been seen, especially after the speech he gave at the United Nations, as very America first and not cooperating with our neighbors. Now, what I can tell you here in the United States is that, unfortunately, it's not going to help him or his image here because there are tons of things going on at the same time. You've got the Russia investigation. You've got the controversy over the Supreme Court nominee. You've got the midterm elections coming up, and if the Republicans are going to maintain or lose power. So I hope that First Lady Melania Trump's trip is successful for her, for the cause that she wants to support, but it will take a lot to help President Trump's image here in the United States.
And finally, do you think, in as much as you say that the relationship between President Trump and the African continent is not defined, do you think he is likely to make a tour of the African continent before 2020?
I'm going to be optimistic and say anything is possible, but I wouldn't count on it.
All right, thank you so much, Dirk, speaking to us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you for your time, of course, giving us your insights on the relationship between President Trump, the U.S. and the African continent, and specifically on the visit by Melania Trump into the country. As I said earlier on, is that Melania Trump is currently visiting the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust in Nairobi, where he is getting to have a look at some of the wildlife that is being conserved there, most of them baby elephants that have been salvaged, rather secured from the impact of poaching. And as I said, is that the U.S. First Lady Melania Trump arrived in Nairobi last night for a landmark visit and was received by the First Lady Margaret Kenyatta at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. And her plane that was carrying her landed at just before 9 o'clock, and she is on her third leg of her visit to Africa, the first solo visit to four African countries. And of course, as I said, we're expecting that after the visit at the David Sheldrake Wildlife Trust, she'll be making her way to State House, where some more conversations are supposed to continue in her campaign for what is being termed as hashtag Be Best. So, as I said, we'll be waiting to see how that pans out. Maybe now we want to talk to John Gashie, who is a local international relations expert. And John Gashie, good morning. You're joining us live on phone. Thank you for speaking to Daybreak. And first of all, we just spoke to an analyst from Washington, D.C., indicating the relationship between the U.S. and Kenya and Africa at large. I don't know, from where you sit, do you see an impact of Melania Trump's visit to Africa, and specifically to Kenya? Does it have any way of improving relations between the two continents, that is the U.S. and the continent? And specifically, is there any benefit in terms of the relationship between Kenya and the U.S.?
Thank you, Sam. I would say this, perhaps in terms of priorities and in terms of what I would call a diplomatic endgame, this is just a continuation of the past. And that the First Lady of the U.S. is in Africa is an important thing, but I think it's more of a publicity stunt, to the extent that it's like, for lack of a better term, possibly saying, do we need Coca-Cola? If you were to look at Coca-Cola, publicity is still good. But in terms of substance, in terms of direction, in terms of impetus, does this change much? Certainly not. But that we have the First Lady of the U.S. visiting a number of African countries, Ghana, Malawi, Kenya, and Egypt, well, it's a blip in my view. And I wouldn't really so much emphasis, because First Ladies are not really the main players in diplomatic relationship and building of diplomatic relations. But is it good for Africa? Yeah, well, as they say, every publicity is good, and I don't think we could begrudge the First Lady for coming to Africa, certainly not. But will this have a major impact? No.
Well, thanks for that, John Gashie. But looking at the relationship between different countries across the world, and being an international affairs expert, we see we have a country that really puts a lot of weight in visiting heads of state or heads of government coming into the country. And for instance, I remember that when the Jubilee government was having confidence level challenges in the first term, the visit by President Barack Obama, the leadership from Israel, and the visit by the Pope, it was seen as a vote of confidence on the country. Just how important is it, should we say, for instance, if President Donald Trump was to visit Kenya, how important are those visits in defining international relations and the benefits that would accrue for Kenya?
Well, we must be able to perhaps differentiate the two. You see, when Barack Obama, he was a sitting president. He was a prime diplomat of the United States. He's the prime face. He's the power. For the Pope, he is the leader of the largest organized faith organization in the world, the Catholic Church. For the First Lady, and I would like perhaps to revert this, when we had our First Lady run the London Marathon, it's a nice feel, but it doesn't alter the fact that the foreign policy direction and leadership is more at the president's level, not at the First Lady level. Also remember that in terms of hierarchy, in terms of projection of power, if he is the president, then the minister or the cabinet colleague in charge of foreign relations. The First Lady of the U.S. coming here, well, it's a good feel, yes, but in terms of protocol, diplomatic protocol, in terms of engagement, in terms of moving the process forward, this would be what I would call a soft approach in which that she will be given all the, shall I say, the nice soft power thing, but in terms of addressing the issues of trade, the issues of aid, the issues of visa or immigration, she wouldn't be able to handle that because her office doesn't have that kind of power.
Well, still an interesting view that you have right there, is talking about soft power that maybe the First Lady of the U.S. would portend for the U.S. government and the relations between the two countries. But I want to ask you finally, what is the potential, what is the place of spouses of presidents or heads of government in as far as international relations are concerned, with mind what you're saying that this is just a soft approach, soft power that is being seen? Like, for instance, our First Lady, what is her place in influencing the international relations between countries?
Yes, Sam. I think it will also depend on how the governance structure. Remember, in any country, the foreign relations docket is really the preserve, in many ways, of the head of state through his principal assistant, in this case, the minister in charge of foreign relations. The First Lady, even would have an input, is that she cannot be ignored, yes, but she cannot conduct foreign relations because she has no substantive position other than being the spouse of the president. Now, does the spouse have more power in terms of moving the process? Again, is a question as to whether then they have a structured manner in which a First Lady or a spouse of the president could influence a country's foreign relations. Having said that, would you then begrudge Melania or, for this matter, the First Lady here? No. Do they have influence within their, partners and spouses in terms of policy making? At what level do they have? I think it's an issue of conjecture. But the First Lady in any country cannot be ignored. But we shouldn't then say that she's equal to the foreign minister, for that matter, or that she has as much input. Now, having said this, I'm saying in marketing, there's something perhaps also we say that is truth well told. And I needed to look at it this way. For Coca-Cola, this American soft drink, they are very visible, even in very poor countries, and even in places where it's not a major issue. For Melania coming over, of course, we could see the U.S., and the U.S. would need to still be visible in the eyes of the international community. But within the Washington crowd, I'm trying to imagine whether our own Foreign Affairs Secretary, she is there, but she wouldn't take any issue with any communique with the Melania. It is really, shall I say, a diplomatic sideshow, really, a feel-good factor, and also flag waving and showing. And Melania is doing a good job, yes, but that does not alter the issues at stake in the conduct of American, foreign relations policy. Does this affect Kenya? I doubt that, but it'll be a feel-good factor. I will grant it that.
Right. And John, just before I let you go, just one last question. Recently, we saw a survey that says about 56% of Kenyans have confidence that President Donald Trump is going to improve the relations between Africa and the U.S. and also, by extension, Kenya. Do you think, from what you've been able to assess in the 2 years that he has been in office, just slightly less than 2 years, compared to other presidencies that have been there in the past in the U.S., do you think that the country and the continent is on course to improving relations with the U.S., specifically in the trade benefits that would accrue from such a relationship?
I would not be that optimistic myself. I think the manner in which Donald Trump has conducted the American foreign policy is more of what I would call isolationism, that is unilateralism vis-a-vis multilateralism. And I think perhaps the end result of this is that there would be a redefinition and a review of the American foreign policy engagement in terms of the larger international community. Perhaps, in a way, America is reviewing its entire foreign policy engagement post the collapse of the Soviet Union, and this is very important, the rise of China and other countries that are claiming a more bigger say in the conduct of international relations in terms of the declining of American impact and influence in international relations. So Trump is, in my view, possibly trying to review, reassess, and also perhaps try to assert American dominance in view of the growth of other, powers like China, India, Brazil, Russia, and indeed, of course, the renaissance of Africa, because Africa cannot be, despite what is happening, cannot be ignored in the future.
All right. Thank you so much, John Gashi, for speaking to us. John Gashi is an international affairs expert who is speaking to us live on phone from Nairobi, of course, talking about that relationship between the U.S. and Kenya, specifically talking about President Donald Trump and his relationship with Africa, bearing in mind that he came into office on the platform of making America great again and indicated that America first. But the story this morning is about that visit by Melania Trump, the First Lady of the United States, who is currently at David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust here in Nairobi, where she is getting an opportunity alongside the First Lady of Kenya, Margaret Kenyatta, to visit some of the baby elephants that have survived poaching at that facility.